the way Harvard kind of maintains it is numbers of white students is through the sports program, which is very surprising. They have program for people who do fencing, people who do obscure sports. And then he said that if it wasn't for that, eh, Harvard would have gone through a phase where the majority of its admissions would be Nigerians.
And when we got to his country, which I believe was Amsterdam, was the Netherlands, my mom stayed in front of the plane. She came down from the plane, stayed in front, and waited for him to come back down. And she said, "We're in your country now, what?"
Welcome to the Bad Natives podcast. With me, Charles Onyango Obo in Nairobi.
Hi there, I'm Ferril Refugee, and you find me in Dubai today.
And as always, I'm Adeswagiwa Sage, speaking to you from the nation's capital, Abuja. And remember to like, subscribe if you like seeing our faces and listening to our voices. It's going to be a good episode today. I recovered from my flu.
Good.
Clearly, you are much more chubby, today.
Yes, I took a medication from America. You know, it's stronger than anything in the world. I think it should be illegal, but I took some Theraflu Max strength and I was good in one day. I was like, wow, I don't know what is in this, but I feel good.
Bob is away. He's at a coffee exhibition in London. The man takes his coffee very seriously, so we'll miss him. And Farrell, what the hell are you doing in Dubai?
What the hell am I doing here? So I'm not following the Donald Trump wagon or caravan through the Middle East. I'm here with my husband who's doing some business here. I must tell you, I grab every opportunity I can to come here because I really enjoy the city planning. And I know it's not a model that can be easily replicated in African cities and in Johannesburg, where I live, but I do enjoy its functionality, Charles.
Well, then I think we should start there because it's one of the things that the UAE and its neighbors further up the road, like Saudi Arabia, grappling with is this whole thing of making cities work, which is, if you ask me, I think the big issue for Africa of this century, and Dubai, they have this, or rather Abu Dhabi, they have what they call, is it the Mazda city? They have attempted a smart city. If you go to Saudi Arabia, they have got this very crazy one. Is it the line?
It's called Neom.
Yeah,
The line.
in Neom, supposed to be 170 kilometers when finished and encased in glass. So how's that caught up the population? But let us get to what we're happening. If because let's see, what does the data tell us? The data tells us that Africa is the fastest urbanizing continent. By 2050, 55% of our population will be living in the cities. And if our cities are going to be what they are now, that is a scary prospect. But there are some people who are doing around it, and some of these projects are controversial. But let me start with you, Farrell. In South Africa, they have initiatives like the parks, they have the Lanseria Smart City. Are those models that we can emulate? And what do you actually speak to us about that?
Sure. In a short answer, no, and I'll come to that in a moment. So my day job is really just as a cities reporter. I'm trying to craft a beat now, Charles, of becoming a cities reporter for precisely the reasons that you've outlined. But it also comes from my having been born and living in Johannesburg and seeing how poor governance can lead to the demodernization of cities and to real detrimental impacts to its people. And I'm trying to understand what are the potentials for creating working cities. I study a lot of the work of Dr. Edgar Peterson, who runs the African Center for Cities in Cape Town. And I don't think that those smart cities, like you talk about the parks or the Lanseria smart city, these are ideas of really gated cities created by the private sector. They're supposed to be smart in that they're ultra connected. They connect people to their workplaces easily. They have digital access, which is cheap. In a dream, yes, but neither of those two examples are for me what the future of cities, either in our country or our continent, looks like. And I guess why I enjoy Dubai is the planning process of the city and the absolute investment in infrastructure. Obviously, it's a very unequal city state, and I don't think it's a replicable model, but I do like its intentionality, the clear planning, and the investment in infrastructure are things that I learn from.
The Adesua, Lagos, which is your first city? Is it Abuja or Lagos?
Oh, Lagos. Lagos, the
Okay.
colony of Lagos predates
So
even the
because
Nigerian state.
it says how many people come to Lagos a day? 4,000, and so
It's crazy.
in a month you have 120,000 new residences. I think it's Africa's biggest city,
Wow.
and it has a huge problem of informality, and yet, just like Pharaoh has said, you have experiments with things like this. What is this fancy
Eco-Atlantic?
city? Yes, yes.
Yeah. See, I
So
really
how
like
is that?
how Yeah, I really like how Thurl has started us off this morning because the inequity is really the problem here. Eco Atlantic City started, I believe, at $1,000 per square meter for pricing, but I think right now is 1,800 to $3,000 per square meter. And you have this idea of building these futuristic, expensive cities within the poorest regions in the world. People often say Nigeria is the poverty capital of the world, but even if we, even if extrapolate away from Nigeria, if we look across West Africa, we have countries that have large populations that are poor, particularly urban populations that are poor. 70% of Lagos is in informal living environments, it's in slums. Most of Lagos City does not have pipe-borne water, does not have access to electricity. And instead of finding a solution that would bring everyone up, to fill in the gap, I think we need 17 million units in Nigeria to fix the housing shortage. And when you look at other countries like Ghana and Senegal, I think the number is like 3 to 6 million units that they need. And instead of innovating in a way to allow even just the middle class access to live in these areas, what you have is people look at Dubai and they look at Saudi and they look at San Francisco and they're like, let's build a very expensive, fancy tech hub that no one can afford to live in, right? It's the 1% of the 1% that can afford these places. And you have them then marketing it to international communities, and then you have some of them failing. So, Hope City in Ghana is one of the things that flopped. Mahama did that in his first term. It's an ambitious, I think, $6 billion project to build a tech city, like tech hub, in Ghana, and it flopped. But you also have to think about the fact that Ghana has huge populations of urban poor, huge, dearth when it comes to housing their population. But they're not trying to fill that gap, right? They're trying to appeal to a very small segment of society. Eco Atlantic is actually coming along, but now that we have the Lagos Calabar Coastal Highway, we're seeing environmental impacts and other significant impacts in that direction. Like so, I mean, but Eco Atlantic is, I was there recently for a fashion show. It's no longer just sand, and I think they've reclaimed nearly three-quarters of what they were planning to.
But why do they fail? Why do they fail? Because why can't these smart cities pull the rest up? Because I guess that's one of the logic, isn't it?
Well, I wouldn't say Eco Atlantic has failed. It's still a it's still progressing, possibly slower than originally intention because of COVID, because of the financial shocks to the naira and Nigeria's economy. But it's still progressing. Like you go there and you see there's a new headquarters there for TVC, which is one of our biggest private news organizations. First Bank in March of this year is one of our biggest banks, has also said started their headquarters in Eco Atlantic City. So it's coming along. It's not a failure. I would say a good example of a failure is probably Akon City, but Akon is,
How's that going? I'm
Akon and
fascinated.
Acoin. I don't even think Akon himself talks about it anymore. But for me as a Nigerian, Akon has always seemed a bit funny. He presents as like he acts like he's like a fella. Like I saw a quote recently. I don't even know if it's accurate, saying that it's because of him that Afrobeats is now successful or
Yes, yes, I
something.
saw
Like
that.
yeah, like Akon. He honestly for me, he's like a Donald Trump, right? Like having a Trump coin and just it's by luck. If it was successful, I think he would have been lucky. But the fact that it's unsuccessful is not surprising because it doesn't. The fundamentals were not there. But I think if you ask me something like Hope City or Akon City or even Eco Atlantic City, the reason why they are failures in one way is because they are not trying to solve the housing crisis, right?
Mm.
They're not trying to, and you can't leapfrog certain things when you don't have that public transportation infrastructure, when you don't have, proper utilities, and when you don't have that infrastructure, you can't just build on top of it. And I think they take the worst from cities like Miami, for example, where rich people are just trying to go to the higher level so they don't get flooded out. Because that's a huge problem we have in Lagos. You're getting flooded out. And Eco Atlantic City, I read an article recently by the Republic Journal, and it was basically saying that these new expensive estates are flooding the rest of Lagos because they're reclaiming the land. But what they're doing is that they're pushing the water to Ibejuleki, to Otodo Gambi. They're pushing the water to the poorer regions. So even these people who are living in slums and stuff are now getting flooded out because people are now trying to build expensive mini cities. And I think that's a failure of imagination or thinking, really, in terms of when it comes to our governments.
No, I have to agree with that, Charles. So just to come in quickly, is that it has to be a whole urban um, policy without creating what often feel to me to be quite gimmicky and very elite cities within cities. And so the examples that I'm looking at is Cape Town, for example, which is now spending a much larger part of its budget on capital expenditure, and that is housing, electricity, good transport systems, and then also looking at examples of where the private sector is beginning to put in cheap connectivity to the poorest parts of cities. And for me, that's the way you connect these cities rather than with elite smart city thinking. It's far more, it's nuts and bolts stuff. Is what are you spending on? How well are you spending? How are you ensuring that it's not all going to connected companies, that it's actually getting into the ground? And it's those things, less sexy, I suppose, than Akon City or so, but the fundamentals of good city creation.
But
Less
what
sexy is
about
important.
the politics? Because one of the things you find is democracy itself has become a problem. You have mayors of cities who are elected, governors who are elected. But if you look at the structure of the electorate, often what the elite want and and what the rest want is very different. So you have you know the the criticism in Kampala, for example, is that the masses elect their type of mayor, and the elite can't do anything, and the type of people they elect are not going to do these things. So you then have the result of a cessation by the elite to to these private problems, and people are saying that perhaps cities should be dictatorships for them to to modernize. What would you say to that, Pharaoh?
I would say, absolutely not. I can see why why that happens, and I'd love to hear Adesua's thoughts on like why the position of Lagos, I think it's Lagos governor or mayor, I'm not sure how they call it, is so fiercely contested, one of the most powerful in that country, and you're seeing that a little bit less in South Africa, but still these positions of the mayoralty are so important, and yet they fall victim to exactly the same kind of patronage politics that you see in the nation state. Whereas for me, these mayors should be your top draw, your best in class, the best of what a country can offer. Should be the ones wearing those mayoral chains. But for me, much more important, and this is really from lived experiences, what's the kind of participatory democracy at a local level, and does it work? Because for me, that's where the rubber hits the road. I've many times said to our local councillor, how do we sit in on your ward committees? How do we know what's going on? How can we form a part of local planning? We have the systems on paper, but in practice, it's very hard to make local democracy work. And for me, that's where I want to focus my attention and time as a reporter on.
Definitely, I agree with Farrell. Definitely not. We don't need a more dictatorship like dictatorial leaders in cities.
Yes.
And I think there's two things here. This brings me is a callback to I think our first episode where I said Nigerians are their own government and the elite more so than anyone, right? You provide your own borehole, you provide your own electricity. Right now, I'm providing my own internet. you know, you can, if you're a big man, you pave your own road. I remember the roads I lived on as a child, my dad paved. In our first home, my dad paved the road or got the state to pave the road because he knew somebody who knew somebody. And then even water, I didn't understand this as a child, but I've been thinking about it recently because my dad had taps outside our house so other people could come and fetch water from our home. And I didn't understand that as a child. I'm like, why would people leave their house and come to our house in the morning on my way to school? I would see people lined up outside my house fetching water in buckets. I did not understand that they didn't have access to pipeline water. And so, you're digging your own boreholes, you're doing these things. And so the elite have opted out of politics in a very detrimental way, even for themselves. But also, you have the other thing. Farrell said that the governorship elections in Lagos are competitive. Maybe optically, but they're really not. Every single governor we have had has been a member of Tinubu's original team. His assistants or the next governor is possibly going to be they're saying it's either going to be the person who's his private secretary now, his principal private secretary, or his chief of staff, or his son. So, and these are the people who are being, positioned to take the reins from Sanwo-Olu, who was a member of his original team. Fashola was a member of his original team. So was Ambode. We talk about state capture, but as a Lagosian, I can tell you that the state has been captured. The last
So city capture is a thing as well.
Yes, and I
Oh
think the
yeah.
last competitive election we had was 2007. So, and you're right, Farrell. People don't. We have councillor elections coming up right now in Lagos. I who pay attention don't really know anything about the people who are running. Um, and so you have this situation where people opt out of the local, but also struggle to hold the governor or the overseer accountable because their power is so entrenched.
Then what if we fail to fix the cities? What scenario are we looking at, Vero? If this fails to work? Because one of the things you have to think is you talk the power that uh, the Tinubu universe has over Lagos. Where does it come from? What needs to be broken? Because if you see, in Nairobi, 60% of the population lives on 2.5% of the city's land. I mean, it's totally crazy. So, you begin to see some issues of ownership there, land ownership, and all that. So, one, to each of you, what is the way out, and what price do you think will pay if we don't fix it, because 2050 is close. Africa will be over 2 billion people. You will have more than 1 billion people living in the cities.
I suppose we're already seeing the impacts of what could happen, and it's not necessarily a negative story. You might see a more rigorous democracy because these are young people. Cities are even younger than rural areas, and it is where most people are living. They're also the most connected population. And I think what the seasons of protests have showed us is that they are much more demanding citizens. You could see them beginning to swing things like they did in Nairobi last year with the youth protests. You now have a much more, maybe not an accountable government, but at least one that's more aware of what its people are thinking. In South Africa, in Johannesburg, which is where I do a lot of my work, is civil society in the city in Johannesburg become so strong that it's forced the president to intervene in the future of what was happening in the city because the noise just got too loud for him to ignore. So I don't see it as a dystopian future. I think it may, in fact, be a good one, but it does require of people that we get organized in cities and use this connectivity, cheaper costs of being connected, of data, to organize ourselves using technology. So I'm a more optimistic person about the future of cities than one who sees a kind of dystopian future as we've seen painted in many movies. So I'm more of a Wakanda type person, I have to tell you.
Not
Yeah.
not Mad Max.
No,
No, no,
more Wakanda.
And that's
I
why.
love that. Yeah, Farrell is always here to balance my pessimism. But again, I live in
It's my
Nigeria.
age.
I know, but as I'm sitting down here, there is no light. I am in Abuja and there is no electricity. This is the federal capital territory. I'm in technically one of the
Sure.
nicest areas. So it's very hard for me to be optimistic. I'm hoping even that if someone comes later and I try and wash my cup, there will be water because there's no light to pump the water. So for me, pessimism is is just the way of being. Now, I would say this in Lagos. Very recently, a girl went viral because she said Lagos is smelling.
Like the place smells like crazy. Why does an entire state smell like this? And what is the government doing about the bad smell? Everything is just so overwhelming.
And it was a very factual observation. During rainy season, because of blocked gutters, Lagos often stinks. It stinks. And she made this observation as well as, she was just complaining about the price of food and eggs and just that she was struggling. And a lot of people were sharing it. It was going viral. She made a video on TikTok. And all of a sudden, the pushback became tribal. People said, go back home. Lagos is the
Wow.
only city that you guys will come here from the east or the south or whatever. She wasn't even, a lot of anti Igbo sentiment has grown, particularly since the last elections. And so people were telling her to go back. She's not even Igbo. They were saying, oh, go back to Anambra. She's not from Anambra. I've had that pushback sometimes if I complain about Lagos, and people are like, why don't you go to your own hometown? You're here complaining about Lagos. You face your governor. If he made your town nice, you wouldn't be in Lagos. And I've been seeing this over and over. And you even have an aide. One of the most prevalent voices of this is the governor's aide, one of his social media aides, who takes on very tribal, like he's very bigoted, right? And I think at some point in time he even got suspended, but he's been rehired. And every complaint about Lagos now is seen within a tribal lens. And if you want to understand how creative they have gotten, because Farrell, you're right, you need an organized citizenry in order to
Yes.
effect change. But if you can separate those people, if you can make them see each other as othered, then you're not going to have that
Quite.
organization. And it's been very effective. And I know you guys this is going to shock you, but even the Senator Natasha incident has become tribal. A woman from the north saying a man from the south sexually harassed her in the workplace. People are saying it's an anti-Yoruba agenda and she wants the president to not be Yoruba. And people believe this. And people want to engage with these conspiracies as though they are worth discussing. So even something that far removed has become a tribal topic in Nigeria. And so I agree with you. If the citizenry is organized and educated and works together, then you can make change happen. But if they are effectively separated, then pessimism wins.
The East African here reported a story, I think on 2 occasions now, where there are people who leave, and particularly because of technology, there is this trend where most people just leave the city and go and set up in the countryside where they can do remote work because they're just they have had enough. Are we going to see is that something in South Africa there are some communities, particularly white communities, which are seen have seceded. They have their own little places. So is secession is that something we are likely to see as an elite response?
Yeah, I mean, in South Africa, we call it semigration, where lots of people who, after COVID, and it became much more possible to do what we're doing now, have an online meeting and discussion and focus. So we didn't have to go to one place to be with each other. They've begun to leave for the small towns and for the Cape. And it's mostly white people, but it is generally your people who can leave, who are in the services sector. They don't have to be in a workplace. So definitely in South Africa, in parts of Southern Africa, it has become a trend. But I don't think, Charles, that it will become big enough to reverse the bigger trend line, which is towards super cities and mass urbanization. That's still big. Like in Joburg and in Gauteng, where you used to live, Charles, if you city planners they often take helicopters to count the pace of migration into the city, because you can see it every day. People are arriving in Johannesburg. They're also arriving in Cape Town from the Eastern Cape. So the trend is still toward the city rather than away from it.
So, talking of people who leave, I think it's probably a good time to segue to South Africa again, because this week uh,
The great check.
50, 50 Afrikaners left.
The great check.
Yes, and they went to the US, and it has become such a big issue in the US itself. And I read there was an article in the Citizen. It called them useful idiots, that they are not aware that they are mostly playing to Trump's domestic race agenda, because all immigration and refugee programs are frozen. So it just brings these 50 in order to to give Trump to his base. What what are you seeing? How has it gone down in South Africa?
I think that on the whole, there's an understanding that these 60 people are not representative in any way, shape, or form of the 60 million people who do live here. There are 4 million white people. 60 is a drop in the ocean. Even if you multiply that number by 10 or 100%, it's still a drop in the ocean. But obviously, what it's showing up in very, very clear terms for me is the supremacism at the heart of the Trump administration. Because at the same time as they're sending a plane to take these 60 white folk who are not refugees by any stretch of the imagination, according to the United Nations, while they are stopping genuine African refugees from reaching any part of the US, as well as cutting off succor and support to them. For me, the supremacism at its heart was absolutely clear. And Donald Trump saying again, there's genocide ongoing in South Africa. There is none. It's going to make for a very interesting meeting with President Ramaphosa when he meets with Trump later this month. I'd love to know how you two are reading things in South Africa.
Let Charles go first, because I
No, no,
have
no.
nothing too light to say.
That's why you are in a country where migration is very big. There is this. I listened to one of Trevor Noah's podcasts. I think he was with Malcolm Gladwell, and he was talking about Harvard, and uh, he said that actually, the way Harvard kind of maintains its numbers of of white students is through the sports program. Which is very surprising. You know, they have program for people who do fencing, people who do obscure sports. And then he said that if it wasn't for that, eh, Harvard would have gone through a phase where the majority of its admissions would be Nigerians. So you, Adesua, those are your people. You tell us. Eh?
Mm. You know, Nigerians, there's this saying, it's quite popular. I said, Nigerian women, we achieve. Nigerian
Mm.
women love to achieve. That's why we're Harvard. We love achieving all over the world. Um, and it's. I mean, to be fair, Nigerians are the most populous Black nation in the world, and I think we forget what that means. I think 1 in 5 or 1 in 6 Black people in the world is Nigerian. So even though we love to make it like a source of pride that you find us in these places, just numbers wise, it does make sense that we are in these places. Now, as somebody who got my degree studying the anti-apartheid movement, um,
Oh,
as somebody who spent time in South Africa and was shocked actually about the race relations there, even very recently, because there is a way that white people are revered in South Africa or see themselves that does not necessarily happen in Nigeria. Just in terms of taking up space or how they speak to you. I remember just being very shocked that I'm like, why are you talking to me like this? It's just, I'm not South African. I will knock. But seeing these, it's kind of for me. It's so crazy 10 years down the line because I studied the anti-apartheid movement, but it was a comparative thesis, and I compared it with the civil rights movement in the South in America, which is where I was. And Trump is basically bringing these two things together because when I saw the Afrikaners that are, supposedly refugees being brought over to America, they reminded me a lot, looks wise, just looking at the families or the people there. They reminded me of white Appalachian people in the South, like in white Appalachia, the mountain ranges going in North Carolina, right? It's like poor white. And this use of white supremacy when things are getting economically tough, and then so you blame the migrants, you blame the blacks, you blame the browns, like, um and they always use the white working class or the white poor actually as some type of visual signifier of this racial supremacy argument. And it's not just America, it's not just South Africa, it's we're seeing it across Europe right now, and it's very, for me, dangerous, because if you're a historian and you see the trends, it's not being I'm not trying to like scare anyone, but I'm just like, this is something that we need to make note of. And I think he was trying to make an example of South Africa. And I don't think it's unconnected from Elon Musk. I don't think it's unconnected from Israel. It's not unconnected from Gaza. And so we need to view what that means for us as Africans, particularly because, last week I was in and out when we're talking about middle powers. But when we look at the Qataris and the Saudis and this new closeness to Trump and his new closeness to Putin, we are on the losing end of this if we're not alert. Because if these people align in that way, black and brown people are the people who will be on the losing end. So for me, that signal, it's been funny. I've seen the videos, but it's also for me very serious and not funny at all.
Really interesting,
but
Adesua.
let me play devil's advocate. Because it's one of the things that informs this is that this whole idea of replacement. So I think that it is important that um, you know, uh, the, an image of white refugees or asylum seekers. It's basically, that's how you save the nation from being overrun by black, brown, and yellow people. Whatever it is. And if you think of it, could you say that we were naive to think that this wouldn't happen? Because if is there people in the world who would see, uh, them becoming a minority after centuries where they have been the powerful lot without them resorting to this kind of thing? I mean, did we expect that they would roll back over without a fight? Is that realistic?
I mean, I don't visit America enough to know, and I certainly wouldn't feel comfortable going there under this administration because I think there's a real danger to being a person of color there now, Charles. But undoubtedly, one of the factors which fueled the last election outcome was the idea that Latinos, that people of color, that Black people were becoming more in number to Caucasian people. So the demographic played obviously a big part of it. I'm not sure how successful this refugee stunt has been as a political play, because on the whole, and maybe it's just an outcome of what I read, people have seen it for the absolute cynicism and racism that it is. So I don't know if it's worked as that kind of play, but that may just be my own political position that makes me see it that way.
This one?
This race, what did you use? What's the word? Replacement
Which
theory.
one?
Yeah,
The
yes,
replacement
replacement.
theory, which is very huge in the right and alt-right. This idea that white people are becoming a minority, as it's something that it's, for me, fascinating in the context of America, which has the one drop rule, right? Is that one drop and you're black.
Hmm.
You guys literally legalized your erasure. But you legalized generational rape and trauma, and then legalized your erasure because you did not want to mix. And so I feel like this is actually their doing. This idea that they're being replaced is because of how they have formed whiteness. What whiteness is in America is such a unique concept because it's an ever-changing concept, right? Because Jewish people were not originally seen as white, Irish people were not originally seen as white, Italians were not originally seen as white. But in this new racial definition, post World War II whiteness, they are still 60% of the population, right? And so what the issue with I am replacement theory is that it overemphasizes how many black or brown or minorities there are because they feel like they should not be there in the first place. This is, a Trump cannot happen in a world where an Obama did not happen. And when you look at American culture and you look at American movies, I remember going there thinking that at least 20% of the population was black. It's not even 15%. It's not even 15% of the population in America that's black. And so you have these overemphasis on black or brown people or Asians taking up any space because they do not believe you should take up any space at all. And so I so anytime I try and engage with these concepts of replacement and particularly when people see the change in Europe and they feel like, oh, there's too many people here now, but you guys want to eat a kebab and you want to have Thai for lunch and you want to have Indian for dinner. I don't take it seriously because they created this. I saw a video of a woman saying that anytime people tell me to not speak on British politics, I should go back home. I wouldn't be here if you didn't come to Nigeria. And I think that's just the truth of this. They have created this world, but they have always felt, and I think we have always felt that, oh, a white minority can come and have a significant presence in Namibia or in Kenya or in Nigeria, and but they have never felt that we can go and have a significant presence, right? And it's the world that they really created, and now they don't they feel like they should only enjoy the benefits of it. No, now it's our turn. I think it's natural. I think you're right, but it's our turn to benefit from this. You came this way, and we're going back with you. That's
I'd be keen to. How did you feel when you came to South Africa and people spoke to you in condescending or superior way?
how did I feel? Oh, the thing is,
What did you do?
I think I had had a little bit of training because I had been in school in the South in America for a little bit, and I had been problematic. And what I mean by problematic is like I was not used to people addressing me or speaking to me in any which way. And I think also it's a privilege in a way growing up in Lagos, obviously growing up, upper middle class, being in certain environments where I just did not consider certain things as a. I told a story recently. Let me give you an example.
Mm.
Because it was my Mother's Day story. When I was very young, we were traveling and a white guy skipped the line. We weren't in front, but he just skipped right to the front. This is in Nigeria, and my mom went to the front of the line and said, "Get back to where you're supposed to be."
I
And
love your mother.
he starts, he's like going, da, 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 da. And he's like, when we get to my country, you'll know. She's like, okay, that's fine. But you're still in my country. Get to the back of the line. And when we got to his country, which I believe was Amsterdam, was the Netherlands, my mom stayed in front of the plane. She came down from the plane, stayed in front, and waited for him to come back down. And she said, we're in your country now, what? And I was like maybe six when this happened. So this is the environment and this is the mindset I grew up with, right? You do not let anyone give you any type of speaking or speak to you anyway or treat you anyway just because you are black or a Nigerian or a woman. When I went to South Africa, for me, it was because there were mostly white people on my school trip. And it was the way it was the way black South Africans treated them. Um, and versus like us, which it just seems slightly subservient, just slightly quieter. And the second was the way white South Africans treated me and my roommate, who were the only two black girls on the trip. And there was always a sense of you're not supposed to be here. And so it was emotional because I think when I experienced that in North Carolina, I felt like I guess I'm in their space or I'm in their country. But I've never experienced it like that in Africa. So it felt it was a very emotional thing. And at the same time, South Africans are quite, they don't really, my experience there was they don't really like Nigerians. And so I felt like I was coming to be like, oh, one Africa, like, oh, let's rise together. And then I'm like, wow, you don't even like me. The white people don't like me. I was like, what is this? What is happening? So
Very.
it was an emotional experience, but I'm really happy I had that especially when I was learning about Pan African history and like anti imperial movements and how we all worked together. So learning that and experiencing that, it felt like such a disconnect.
And my first book was called "What If There Were No Whites in South Africa," and it it wasn't a great success because I hadn't properly tabulated or accounted for the intergenerational impacts of colonialism and apartheid in the ways that you describe. So the very people I was aiming at it was like a treatise of Pan Africanism and making your own way in the world. It completely discounted those impacts that you describe so well there.
Wow, this has been wonderful. And remember, please to follow us. Subscribe to our channel. We will really appreciate and we love you for it. And we'll do something different today. We have parting shots, but two. Everyone gives me two. One, so at the SOA, you are like, you are free to give us a pessimistic one, but the second one must be positive. And same with you, Vera.
I think Farrell has to go first because I have to think hard. I have to think very, very hard. But also, before our parting shot, if you're listening to us, you can also watch us on YouTube. And if you're watching us on YouTube, you can listen to us anywhere you find your podcasts. So make sure you like, subscribe, share with anyone you like or don't like. And yes, Farrell, please, your parting shot. I have to think. If I'm going to be optimistic, I have to think.
My parting shot is in memoriam. So it is sad, but also celebratory of a wonderful African who passed this week, Koyo Kuyo, who was a Cameroonian woman who had just been appointed to lead the Venice Biennale, the first African woman to do so, tragically died this week at 57. But she was the head of the Mokazites Museum and Gallery in Cape Town, where she did the most path-breaking and revolutionary work. So her archive is there for us even while we mourn her in this week.
I will have two. Thank you. I have thought of a positive one. There is Nigeria's first official CAN selection. I believe it's going on right now. Let me just get the name out because I did have one of them. His name is Wale Davies, and he is also known as Thames's manager, and he's also a member of a band, but he has now directed or produced Nigeria's first Can selection. So let me just get the name. Let me just get the name out. It's called My Father's Shadow. And it's premiering on Sunday at the Nigeria's Can 2025 program. And it's very impressive. It's him and another girl called Fumbi. They're very quite young. And it's just for me, one thing we talk about like soft power, and African creativity. And it's very inspiring for me to see people who are around my age doing things that are very impressive and bringing so much of the culture together and putting it on a world stage in a way that's beautiful. So shout out to Wale Davis and Fumbi. My Father's Shadow premieres May 18th at the Screen Nigeria Can program. And my other parting shot, pessimistic. Oh my god, I can't speak English. I'm getting ahead of myself here. My parting shot is to an antelope, because flights were grounded, multiple flight delays across Nigeria. Why? There was an antelope on the Asaba runway, and an Air Peace flight hit an antelope, which the biggest thing here is that a lot of people did not know there were antelopes in Nigeria. So people were like, "Oh, not a goat, not a cow, it hit an antelope, yeah."
That's beautiful.
An antelope grounded flight caused flight delays across the country because a plane hit an antelope in the Asaba airport. So my parting shot is to the antelope. Rest in peace. Rest in peace. Rest in peace to the Asaba antelope. I hope I hope your family is doing all right.
No, my parting shots. One of the things which kind of fascinates me. I read all these articles about why Nigerians are obsessed with setting world records. eh? So there is this one. This guy, he's called T. Yos Signature. He is the official barber of the Super Eagles football team.
I see.
And he's trying to set a world record for the longest haircut. In other words, he wants to give the most number of haircuts in 7 days. He will not rest.
Oh.
He will be shaving heads. So I mean, and I'm a sucker for that. I'll follow and see how that goes. But
This
but
is so
but
upsetting. This world
but I have a
record thing
sad
is
one, and
so
it comes
upsetting.
from Sudan. I was reading this story about the horrific conditions that the people they are suffering in the war, in the camps. There is no humanitarian aid getting to them. And this story said how people are eating leaves, boiling and eating leaves. That has happened to other many situations. But the one thing that really devastated me, they said that after they have cooked, they are eating the charcoal
Hmm.
to keep alive. And I just, just anyway, you've been wonderful people. Have a great week,
Thank you.
and
Thank you.
see you next week.